Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about something that's kind of depressing but also super important, massive financial failures. Specifically, we're diving deep into some of the biggest financial losses in American corporate history. We're not just talking numbers here, though those are definitely going to be huge and kind of hard to wrap your head around, but more importantly, we're going to try and understand the why. What went wrong? What were the decisions, the systems, the pressures that led to these companies losing, in some cases, tens of billions of dollars? So buckle up, grab your thinking cap, and maybe a stress ball, because we're about to explore some of the most fascinating and cautionary tales in the history of American business. Let's get started. Our journey begins in the energy sector, with a company that was once considered one of the most innovative and successful businesses in America, Enron. You might remember Enron from your history books, or maybe from that one episode of your favorite crime drama. They were a massive energy trading company dealing with everything from natural gas to electricity. For a while, Enron seemed unstoppable. Their stock price was soaring and they were hailed as pioneers of the new energy economy. But behind this facade of success, something much darker was brewing. Enron's success was built on a foundation of lies. Through a complex web of accounting tricks and shell companies, they hid billions in debt. Imagine building a skyscraper on playing cards. It might look impressive, but eventually, it will come crashing down. And that's what happened with Enron. As their financial shenanigans unraveled, investors panicked, and the stock price plummeted. Enron filed for bankruptcy in 2001, one of the biggest corporate collapses in American history. The collapse led to widespread job losses, billions in investor losses, and the Sarbanes-Oxley Act to prevent similar scandals. Enron's legacy is a stark reminder of the dangers of corporate greed and the importance of ethical business practices. Next, we're traveling to the heart of Wall Street, to the year 2008, when the world watched in disbelief as one of the oldest and largest investment banks in America, Lehman Brothers, crumbled before our eyes. Lehman's collapse was a defining moment of the 2008 financial crisis, a crisis that rippled across the globe, shaking the foundations of the global financial system. But to understand what happened with Lehman Brothers, we need to talk about what led to it. The subprime mortgage crisis. In the years leading up to 2008, banks were giving out mortgages to people who, frankly, couldn't afford them. These risky mortgages, known as subprime mortgages, were then bundled together and sold off as investments to other banks and investors. It was like a giant game of hot potato, with everyone hoping they wouldn't be left holding the toxic asset when the music stopped. And for a while it seemed like the music would never stop. Housing prices were skyrocketing, banks were raking in profits, and everyone was feeling good. But as with all bubbles, this one was bound to burst. And when it did, the consequences were catastrophic. Housing prices plummeted, defaults on those subprime mortgages soared, and the value of those mortgage-backed securities that everyone was holding plummeted. Lehman Brothers, heavily invested in these toxic assets, found itself on the brink of collapse. They desperately sought a bailout from the government, but unlike previous bailouts this time, the government said no. On September 15, 2008, Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy, sending shockwaves through the global financial system. The stock market went into freefall, credit markets froze, and the world was plunged into the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. Chapter 3. Worldcom, the billion-dollar accounting fraud. Now let's rewind a bit back to the year 2002 to talk about another massive corporate scandal that rocked the business world, the downfall of WorldCom. WorldCom was a telecommunications giant, a company that connected millions of people across the globe. They were a symbol of the dot-com boom, a company that seemed to be writing the playbook for success in the new digital age. But just like Enron, WorldCom's success story was built on a foundation of deceit. Through a complex scheme of accounting fraud, they inflated their revenues by billions of dollars, misleading investors and artificially inflating their stock price. Imagine this. You're running a lemonade stand, and to make it seem like you're selling more lemonade than you actually are, you start adding water to the mix. You might fool a few customers at first, but eventually, people are going to notice that their lemonade is a little off. That's essentially what WorldCom did, but on a much larger scale. They were essentially cooking the books, making it seem like they were making way more money than they actually were. And for a while it worked. Investors were impressed, the stock price soared, and Worldcom's executives became incredibly wealthy. But as with all good things, the party eventually had to end. In 2002, internal auditors at Worldcom uncovered the fraud, and the news sent shockwaves through the financial world. The company's stock price plummeted, wiping out billions of dollars in market value and leaving investors holding the bag. Worldcom filed for bankruptcy on July 21, 2002, becoming at the time the largest bankruptcy filing in American history. The collapse of Worldcom, coming so soon after the Enron scandal, further eroded public trust in corporate America and led to increased calls for greater financial transparency and accountability. Chapter 4: General Motors, the end of an American icon? Our next stop takes us from the world of high finance to the factory floor, to the heart of the American auto industry. For decades, General Motors, or GM, was more than just a car company. It was an American icon, a symbol of innovation, industrial might, and the American dream. But in 2009, this titan of industry found itself on the brink of collapse, brought down by a perfect storm of factors, including a global recession, soaring fuel prices, and years of mismanagement. GM's story is a cautionary tale about the challenges of adapting to a changing world, the dangers of clinging to outdated business models, and the high cost of failing to innovate. For much of the 20th century, GM was the undisputed king of the American road. They produced some of the most iconic cars in history, from the Chevrolet Corvette to the Cadillac Eldorado, and their factories provided good-paying jobs to millions of Americans. But as the 21st century dawned, GM found itself struggling to keep up with a changing world. Foreign automakers, particularly those from Japan and South Korea, were producing more fuel-efficient and technologically advanced vehicles, and American consumers were taking notice. At the same time, GM was saddled with massive legacy costs, including generous pension plans and healthcare benefits for retirees, which made it difficult for them to compete on price with their foreign rivals. The global recession of 2008 was the final nail in the coffin for GM. With credit markets frozen and consumer spending plummeting, car sales dried up, and GM, already struggling to stay afloat, found itself hemorrhaging cash. In June 2009, after years of declining sales and mounting losses, GM filed for bankruptcy, marking a dark day for the American auto industry and a sobering reminder of the challenges facing even the mightiest of companies in a rapidly changing global economy. Chapter 5: AIG Too Big to Fail? Our final stop takes us back to the world of high finance, to the insurance giant AIG, a company that became synonymous with the 2008 financial crisis and the controversial government bailouts that followed. AIG's story is a complex one, involving risky financial bets, a lack of regulatory oversight, and a bailout that sparked a national debate about the role of government in a free market economy. AIG, or American International Group, was a massive insurance conglomerate, a sprawling global giant with operations in over 130 countries. For years, they had been a pillar of the financial system, a company that seemed as safe and secure as the Rock of Gibraltar. But beneath this veneer of stability, AIG was taking on enormous risks, particularly in the market for credit default swaps, or CDS. These complex financial instruments were essentially insurance policies against the default of mortgage-backed securities, those same toxic assets that brought down Lehman Brothers. AIG, believing that the housing market would continue to boom, sold trillions of dollars worth of these CDS, essentially betting that those mortgage-backed securities would never fail. Of course, we know how that story ends. When the housing bubble burst and those mortgage-backed securities began to default, AIG found itself on the hook for billions of dollars in payouts, more money than they had on hand. The government, fearing that AIG's collapse would trigger a complete meltdown of the global financial system, stepped in with a massive bailout, ultimately providing the company with over $180 billion in taxpayer funds. The AIG bailout was controversial, to say the least. Critics argued that it amounted to a massive giveaway to Wall Street executives who had gambled with other people's money and lost. Supporters argued that it was a necessary evil, a last-ditch effort to prevent a complete economic collapse. Outro: Lessons Learned and the Future of Finance. Thanks for watching. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of business and finance. From the energy sector to Wall Street to the auto industry, The stories we've explored today highlight the interconnectedness of our global economy and the devastating consequences that can occur when greed, recklessness, and a lack of accountability are allowed to run rampant. But these stories also offer valuable lessons about the importance of ethical business practices, the need for greater transparency and accountability in the financial system, and the crucial role that government regulation can play in preventing future crises.